Hey guys, this is Jay Calderon with Jay Unboxing, going over the weekend's results and going to be handing out some fighter grades. And of course, would love to hear your guys' thoughts on some of the fighters, and of course, would love to hear some of the grades you'd like to hand out as well in the comments section below. Would love to hear them all. So it was a solid enough first week of the new year, 2022, perhaps headlined, so to speak, by the all-heavyweight pay-per-view that Premier Boxing Champions put on that took place on Saturday. No real title changes or major bouts over the course of the last 7 days, but some fun action, and of course, we will take a look at all of that and hand out some of these scores. So let's get into it. Now, the first fighter that we're going to start with here is actually Frank Martin. Now, he is a lightweight that actually fought on the preliminary bouts for the Charles Martin versus Luis Ortiz pay-per-view that I mentioned just previously and took out Romero Duno in 4 rounds. Grade I'm going to be going with here is an A-. Now, I think it was a solid test for him at this point in his career. Duno had some decent pop, but nothing too crazy. Had been around the block a bit, had been in there with some decent fighters, so it's a nice, good benchmark to see where the relatively young Martin is at this point in his career. And to be honest with you, outside of being caught by a few shots, which is not always a bad thing for a young fighter to begin with, he looked pretty good, and I thought that he had some really, impressive skills that he showed some power in there, and again, took a shot, which is not a bad thing. I also think it was a great profile booster as he did fight in kind of the most impressive bout on that undercard, in my opinion, especially the preliminary bouts. It's a good way to kind of get him out there on a night where there wasn't a tremendous deal of boxing, but one specific show that people were sort of watching, so to speak, and he looked really good. Like I said, took a few shots, nothing necessarily bad about that, but he also showed he could counter, had some good reflexes, and put forth a really good effort in terms of his left hand that ultimately ended that contest. A very good knockout, and if you missed it, you should definitely go back and check that out as well. Solid performance for him, and that's why he gets the grade he gets. Now, the second fighter I'm going to go with here is Jonathan Rice, and the grade that I'm giving him is a B-. He, of course, defeated Michael Coffey in a rematch of their July 2021 encounter, and he won by 10-round unanimous decision in the heavyweight division. The reason he's getting a lesser grade than perhaps you might have given him, say, for his first fight when he won that against Michael Coffey, is because he didn't improve. In fact, he actually made the fight a little bit harder for himself. He had a little less tenacity in there at times, it felt like. He also came in a little heavier, and as a result of that, a little more lethargic, a little more sluggish at times. And I think he could have benefited from really being the version of himself that he was in their first encounter. Now, he got bailed out to some degree because Coffey kind of suffered from much the same fate of kind of being a little too lethargic, a little too one-dimensional, and coming in heavy himself. So you didn't really see Rice have to pay the consequences of those actions, but it wasn't the sort of performance that at all really lights up the heavyweight division. After that first fight for him with Coffey, he had made himself a little bit of a name in sort of the top 20 heavyweights in the world, which of course allows for him to have maybe a shot here or there, trying to face someone in the top 10, and next thing you know, you're in a pretty good spot. However, this doesn't exactly take some luster off of these series of fights, but it certainly doesn't improve his standing, in my opinion. He kind of reverted back to the Rice that he had been perceived as prior to that first Coffey fight, and as a result of that, the grade sort of reflects it. Fighter number 3 we're going with here is Frank Sanchez, and I'm going to be giving him a B- as well. He defeated Christian Hammer on the undercard for Martin versus Ortiz in the core-featured bout of the evening, as a matter of fact, and did so over the 10-round distance, picking up a unanimous decision. Quite honestly, it's a lot of the same in terms of the Jonathan Rice criticism, not in terms of putting on excess weight, but in terms of just kind of taking one step forward, one step backwards in terms of perception. I mean, look, the good here is he didn't lose a round, he didn't get hurt, he looked smooth in there, and when he did push forward, he didn't look like in any jeopardy of being hurt at all. He was in very much control of the fight. The problem was he didn't seem to step on the gas or go through those gears. He took a step back from the Ajagbe one where everyone was starting to think, wow, this is a slick, defensive-minded Cuban who actually has some power and can actually dominate a fight. Here he seemed to kind of revert back to what some people thought he was before that fight, where he could be a little bit passive at times and not necessarily have that killer instinct. Cubans, as it is, have a hard time selling in this sport sometimes, and so when you have a big one who's very skilled and who is allegedly 29 years old, you hope he's young and fresh enough and can hit hard enough, especially at heavyweight, that he could maybe kind of overcome that sort of hurdle. But if you're putting in performances where, you're leaving a little bit to be desired, you're going to sometimes end up being a bit underwhelming at times. And as a result, because of that perception and because of the sort of step back he might have taken with that perception, I'm giving him the B minus. And in a bit of a theme here, the fourth fighter is Luis Ortiz, yet another heavyweight, and I'm going with another B minus. Again, it wasn't a terrible performance in his victory over Charles Martin with a 6-round technical knockout at heavyweight. It wasn't as though it was a terrible performance. The issue was that anytime he got even remotely tagged clean by Martin, who's a decent puncher, but not the devastating puncher that, say, Wilder is, he went down. He still won, of course, so you can't give him too much of a negative grade here because he won without question, in my opinion. It probably should have been stopped a little bit earlier. But did he look like the kind of scary heavyweight boogeyman that he was perceived to be when everyone seemed to be avoiding him? No. In a sort of pro and con way, he actually seems like a fighter many might want to try to pick off now because he might seem ripe for the picking. The benefit for him, the one thing where it kind of helps him, is that he still looks like a guy who could get it done if you sleep on him or if he catches you with that shot, because his counter skills were still okay. It was his foot movement looking a little bit off at times, his balance a little bit, his coordination, and then he just seems to have zero punch resistance at this point in his career. With him, it could be an issue going forward of whoever gets hit first might go down. And that might really be the issue, unfortunately, for him. But for us, it does make for some exciting fights. And Ortiz versus Martin was a decent one in its own right. So I give him the grade of a B minus. Now, breaking the trend of B minuses here, we have fighter number 5, and that's Charles Martin, and I'm giving him a D plus. I cannot sit here and say with any sort of validity, in my opinion, that he deserves an F. He doesn't. He put forth a decent effort against Ortiz, who really has beaten everyone pretty soundly with the exception of Deontay Wilder. Gave him some tough moments, made him feel his age at times. He just really did not finish this fight rather well. He obviously got hurt there in that 6th round very early and seemed almost bewildered and puzzled as to how to do anything. He really had no poise in that moment once he was hurt, and from there on, when he was knocked down and sort of had his face drug against the ropes as he crumpled to the canvas, the fight was pretty much over at that point as far as I was concerned. I mean, he made it up and he wanted to fight, and I'll give him credit for that, but what made matters worse was he took more of a beating, and then after the fight, kind of had some shenanigans there where it was like, okay, now you're looking even bad, not in defeat, but also outside of defeat and after defeat. It just was not a great look for him. In terms of the performance, like I said, I can't give him an F. He had his moments, but it definitely went from, what could have been an A-plus performance for him, considering he was an underdog, to about as bad as it could get in a matter of about 3 minutes. Because, again, while Ortiz held his own, it wasn't a whitewashing on either front. He's definitely going to be the one that perceived as the better fighter of the two of them now that everything's said and done and the dust has settled. It really was not a great look for Martin, which is why I went with the grade that I went with. Honorable mention here goes to Kazuto Ioka, who defended his version of the 115-pound title against Ryoji Fukunaga via a 12-round unanimous decision. I'm going with a grade of a B minus. Could have went a little bit lower, to be honest with you. He just didn't look good. And now he has a fight lined up with Jerwin Ancajas, who was supposed to be in this fight, but that's a unification bout at 115 that I'm thinking Ancajas is looking forward to now even more than ever, because this is kind of 2 fights in a row where Ioka just did not look great. It just was not one of his better performances. For Fukunaga, I got to say, I mean, the grade I'd be giving him, to be perfectly honest, is something around like a B plus or an A. I know it's weird to give him perhaps a better grade than the guy that beat him, but when you have some people saying you should win, when you're a late replacement, when you're facing a guy who many have in their top 10s and they have them, very high up in the rankings at 115 pounds, you did as good as you could probably do on very short notice, coming in, and really putting forth a valiant effort. So, interesting bit of scoring there. Would have put this in my actual official grading system here, but to be perfectly honest with you, I did not watch the entirety of that fight because I couldn't find a good version of it, so I didn't want to be unfair there. But from what I could see, which is a good portion of it, those are the sort of grades that I'd be going with there. In any event, let me know what you guys think down in the comments. Would love to hear your thoughts, your grades, so on and so forth. Kind of agree with mine, disagree with mine, let me know. Please be sure to like, comment, share, subscribe, and follow at @JCalderon_JOB on Twitter. You can email me at jonboxing@gmail.com. Would love to hear from you there. Also, be sure to check out junboxing.com for schedule, results, betting odds, rankings, and more. Of course, Wednesday to Thursday, be looking for my next post on the channel here. Not exactly sure what I'm doing yet, but we'll keep you posted there as well. And as always, until next time.